An audio interface includes the necessary circuitry for taking in microphone signals, mic preamps, as well as providing direct connections from electric guitar and bass and other electronic instruments like synths and drum boxes. The mic preamps in an interface can range from inexpensive utility circuits that simply get the job done to the better preamps with superior sound quality, sometimes found on more high-end interfaces. Still, many recordists decide to supplement the circuitry built into the interface with additional high-end analog processors. These may include not only dedicated mic preamps, but also other components like compressors and EQ. These may be chosen for their distinctive analog quality, the extra warmth and presence associated with high-end analog circuitry that's so desirable even in this modern digital era. Often these are vintage devices or modern hardware emulations utilizing tubes, transistors, and transformers that can add some analog magic to any incoming audio signals being recorded. This kind of input signal path is referred to as an analog front end, and even smaller studios may incorporate analog hardware this way. While assembling an analog signal path from multiple tracks, or recording through a classic analog mixer, can be prohibitively expensive, even the most budget-conscious studio may be able to afford a single front-end chain. Many studios record multiple tracks as overdubs, adding one track at a time to build up a full arrangement, and each successive overdub can be run through the same front-end signal path, imparting the desired analog quality to all the recorded audio, one track at a time. Now, of course, there are tons of plugins that also emulate the analog sound quality of classic or vintage hardware, but many recordists feel like sometimes there's still nothing like the real thing, and running a signal from a good mic through actual analog hardware will add something subtle that no amount of software emulation will quite match. This is especially true of mic preamps. The analog character of a mic preamp is not just the sound of the internal circuitry, but also the way the input impedance of the preamp circuitry and the output impedance of the microphone interact. With one notable exception, this interaction is not emulated with software emulations, and the more utilitarian preamps typically included with small to mid-level interfaces may not offer as much analog character as a dedicated high-end analog mic pre. There are many hardware preamps available, ranging from those designed to capture maximum clean detail for high-end mics, to classic or vintage-style character preamps that utilize circuitry to deliberately add analog edge, the kind of saturation that can make a vocal or other recording sound fuller, warmer, and more present. An analog front end may also include other processors. Vintage analog compressors may combine analog warmth with a unique response characteristic. Some, like the popular LA2A and the many copies and clones that emulate the original, offer very subtle compression that can help to both warm up the sound and provide subtle dynamic control without the signal sounding compressed. Over-compressed audio on the way in can potentially lock the recordist into an overprocessed track later on in the mix, but gentle compression, subtly applied, can be perfect for imparting analog character and providing dynamic control that'll make that track easier to mix later on. EQ is another processor sometimes employed in an analog front end. Of course, it should always be applied subtly. I'd suggest typically no more than a dB or two. Some EQs are prized so much for their unique analog character that they may be used in the front-end signal path without even applying any booster cut. The famous Pultec EQP-1A is a tube-based EQ that combines a passive EQ circuit with a tube signal boost that's always in the circuit. Some engineers like to run this EQ flat in the input signal path just to impart that subtle analog tube character. Of course, when bringing analog signals into the DAW, especially when using an analog front end, it's always important to keep an eye on signal levels and do a careful recording setup. I'll pick up there in the next video.